Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on boosting malware detection and response with SOAR. Before we begin, I do want to go over some quick housekeeping items with you guys. So I want to let everyone know that today's session will be recorded and it's going to be shared out via email where you can rewatch at your own convenience. And furthermore, we're going to have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So feel free to use the Zoom control panel at the bottom of your screen to ask questions at any point in time during the presentation. So before we begin, I do want to introduce myself and Rob. So my name is Caroline and I'm on the demand gen team here at Simplify. And today I am joined by the fabulous Rob Allen. Rob is a senior solutions engineer here at Simplify with over a decade of experience in the cybersecurity space, specifically both the SOAR and SIM space. So before Rob dives into the platform, I do want to quickly first set the stage to what you'll see shortly. So for our agenda for today, we're going to quickly review some common malware challenges and how Simplify can help solve them. We're going to go into a brief introduction of SOAR and the Simplify platform. Then I'm going to hand things over to Rob to give our live demonstration. And then we're going to conclude out with some question and answers. So moving on to malware and how Simplify stops malware in its tracks. So according to our State of Remote Security Operations report, 30% of survey respondents said that they saw an increase in malware threats. And this is really more important to note now than ever with work from home on the rise. So home networks are 7.5 times likelier than a corporate network to have 5 or more distinct types of malware. So with these challenges in mind, it's really important to note how Simplify comes in. So Simplify drove down time to identify the link between alerts from over 7 hours to only 5 seconds. So Simplify here is really the solution, and it helps analysts streamline malware investigations, enabling them to get more cases closed and result in a more secure network. So now more about Simplify. So as a company, we are rooted in the SOC. And as we like to say, we were born in the SOC. So our company was founded by security operations experts who worked in a government SOC and then went to train dozens and dozens of both military and civilian SOCs from around the world. So they founded the company and developed Simplify based on their experiences and everything that security operations teams need to succeed. So we are the leading security operations platform, and we're trusted by the biggest and best enterprise and MSSPs from around the world. Many Fortune 500 companies and the Gartner Magic Quadrant MSSPs trust Simplify as a platform to run their security operations day in and day out. And finally, we are really designed with the customer in mind, providing rapid to time value and bridging the gap between on-prem and cloud security operations. So this is really now more important than ever with the hybrid workforce and work from home environments. So now what sets us apart? So there are a lot of SOAR solutions out there, but here's what sets Simplify apart. So while SOAR is at the heart of what we do, we also offer a much broader solution that really serves as a central workbench for security operations, from really the entry-level analyst to the SOC manager and beyond. And we really focus on a threat-centric approach. So this groups alerts from across your detection tools into single threat-centric cases. So this really ensures the analysts are spending their time on threats versus chasing alerts, and it really provides huge efficiency gains. And finally, the Simplify platform is powerfully simple. So yes, there is a lot of power and flexibility for engineers, but our simple and intuitive platform allows analysts to be productive and ramp up quickly. So it enables them to consistently make rapid and educated decisions. So with that in mind, I'm going to hand things over to Rob, who's going to give us a demo and walk us through the malware product demo in this simplified platform.
Thank you very much, Caroline. Okay, I'll just share out my screen. I can just confirm everyone can see my screen okay?
Yes.
Lovely, okay. So as Caroline said, there's kind of a focus here to look at malware and automation and how we can help on that. So to start that kind of journey conversation, our main screen here is our case management screen, and there's a few key pieces of elements of data to look at on here. So to start with, on our far left-hand side, we have a list of current open cases and alerts, and these are cases that are effectively allocated to myself or to a group that I'm a member of. So I can see everything that's currently open and outstanding and perhaps needs some action. For the demonstration purposes, I'm going to look at our C2 traffic alert that we have here. And a part of this kind of alert chain, and then there's sort of numerous alerts that are part of this, this case. So I'll just slide this side menu out of the way. So the first things we'll look at here is this: a C2 traffic alert was the case name. And then this basically contains 3 separate alerts. So if we just quickly look at each one in turn. So the first here we can see is an out of hours alert, derived it just before 2 a.m. in the morning. And if we can look over here to the right, we can see that that was derived from a Windows platform. If we look at the next alert, we can see a similar kind of thing, similar time frame, IPS platform. And then finally our third alert, and we can see this being our malware from our AV platform or an EDR tool. And for this one, we've generated our alert out of Symantec. So we can see straight away that we have 3 alerts as part of our case. And this really ties into that threat-centric approach that Caroline was mentioning, in that rather than having a singular analyst looking at each alert in turn, or maybe even having 3 analysts all looking at the same problem, our approach, by grouping these alerts together, gives us the ability for one analyst to look at all of them combined. Now, how does this all work? Well, basically, we ingest an alert and we can bring it from each of those tools in turn, the Windows, the IPS, the DLP tool maybe, or from a particular scene, and we bring those alerts into our platform. We then parse and normalize the data. So as we can see here over on the left-hand side, this gives us a consistency for things like naming conventions. So IP addresses, hashes, URLs, regardless of where you use these items within our platform, they will always have the same kind of format and structure. It also makes reporting far easier because you can simply report on a source IP and don't have to be concerned that it might be called something else elsewhere within the platform. Once we've normalized our data, what we're then able to do is when we ingest a brand new alert, we parse it, we normalize it, and then we say, does this alert belong or have anything in common with any other alerts within the platform, any other open cases? And if we see other alerts that have got the same hash, IP, or username within a particular kind of time frame, and that would be 2 hours by default, we can then look to group those alerts together to correlate them. And the platform does this automatically. So there's no additional kind of configuration required on the back end. And we're really giving you an additional layer of correlation on top of what your SIEM is perhaps providing for you. So this really helps kind of speed up investigations for analysts, and it kind of starts to draw together commonality amongst alerts that they're perhaps seeing. So then next thing perhaps to look at is how we've simplified joining these 3 alerts together. So the easiest way to probably inspect that is via our explore function. And the explore gives you the ability to visualize those alerts. So rather than having to kind of wade through text files and understand data flows and IP addresses and which alert came first, we take all that pain away by presenting you as a graphical UI. So just to briefly explain what we're looking at here, anything with a blue background is an asset internal or something that we can effectively control. So internal to your company, internal user, laptop, server, desktop. Anything with a black background is external to us. So an external site, IP address, server, etc. Furthermore, anything that's highlighted in red has effectively been determined to be suspicious via threat intelligence. And we'll come on to how that works in a few moments. So now, as we receive new alerts into our platform, they will automatically get added here and they will automatically be added to this graph. So we have the same 3 alerts we saw on our previous screen. And if we just simply step through them, we can see our very first alert was our out of hours warning. We know this came from a Windows platform. and it was related to Adam. And we can see that Adam logged in at 2 or just before 2 a.m. in the morning. If I wanted to find out further details about Adam, perhaps his contact details, his manager's information, all of that I can pull back from Active Directory. So we can enrich these assets effectively, these entities within our tool, without you needing to go into additional software. So it saves you a lot of time and management overhead. And it also means that you don't need to be experts in every single tool within your portfolio. Equally, if I then go on to our next alert, the IRC connection, I can now start to see and have context behind what's gone on. So now I can see from Adam on his computer has effectively interacted with this site that's been determined to be suspicious or malicious. Then finally, my virus alert, my AV. And again, on here, I can see from Adam's computer with a process of Chrome, so via a web browser, is clearly probably hit this website, downloaded a file from it, and from that, we've also got the file hash. So the AV is triggered. We ourselves have kind of taken this hash value and we've enriched it and we've provided further intelligence around that entity. And as I mentioned, any additional alerts that get generated will automatically populate through on here. At this point, I could also interact with these kind of entities as well. So I could highlight the user and perhaps use Active Directory to directly disable their account. Or if I have an EDR tool in place, I could look at here and maybe use Microsoft ATP or a CrowdStrike platform to isolate or run scans on that endpoint. So there's lots of options available here that we'll cover in a few moments. So we just step back to our previous case. So now we can see our alerts. We can see the timelines to when we received those alerts. And we've now got a good understanding of how those things are connected and related to each other. And we can easily understand the story behind them. So then if we just drop down a little further, let's look at our first alert, the out of hours one from Windows. So from here, we can see our insights, and insights are created via our playbooks. So when we run an action, enrich maybe for an AV alert, or if we enrich things like our user, we can pull back our AD details. And from here, I could expand on it and I could add extra data to say, show me the contact details, show me the manager's information, whatever your kind of SOC and workflow would like, we can look to build that into here. So from here, I can see that this user is in HR. So again, I might consider that unusual. Why would HR be logging in at 2 a.m. in the morning? If I then just drop down slightly further, I can effectively look at our playbook and I can see it's still running. So that's denoted by the little yellow icon. And we have our various steps of a playbook. Now, I'll touch on these steps in our second alert in a few moments, but basically any kind of SOAR tool that you may have seen in the market, they'll all have some kind of reference to these steps. And basically they each denote an action. So it could be assigning the case, setting the priority, putting a tag on the case, changing the stage or status of the case. All these things can effectively be performed by these steps and actions. But what we can see here, of course, is that we're actually prompting the analyst to now review this user's authentication. So now we're prompting them to manually go and check if this is acceptable by the user. So do they know about it? And furthermore, we're suggesting that because it could be a compromised account, not to email them. So we're suggesting that they go and speak to the user directly. So now let's continue here and say that actually we have performed this action. So we've done our investigation and we've confirmed to the user. And now we can prompt our analyst to make a second decision. So was the user aware of these activities? Did the user log in at 2 a.m.? If they didn't, we can effectively say that they weren't aware of those activities, select no, and we can then execute that task. And if we execute this process, we'll then end up running down this chain of events. So very briefly, we can highlight each of these actions in turn. So we could perhaps disable the AD account. We could force a Windows password update or reset, and then we could perform additional actions. So we could raise the case up to an incident level. We could perhaps communicate with an external ITSM, so ServiceNow or Jira, and we could create an external ticket. But effectively, all of this and all of these processes are effectively a defined workflow for your SOC. So the things that the team and the organization have approved. So every time you have this type of an alert generated, we want to perform these actions and this workflow. So we don't need to go to external books to see what we should do on each of these incidents. We don't have to remember all of our credentials to force these password updates and resets. We can do this all automatically. So let's just look at one more of these alerts. So let's look at the AV one for our malware purposes here. So again, we can pull this from kind of any AV, EDR kind of platform. So we could have, for example, shown here, we have McAfee, Symantec. We could look at from Microsoft ATP, CrowdStrike, SentinelOne. So anything that's going to generate those alerts, and we can effectively ingest those into the platform and present the information back to the analyst. So for here now, we've interrogated it using the Microsoft endpoint client. So from that host, we can pull back a whole raft of information. So to do with operating system versions, patching levels, location, anything that's kind of relevant for our team for investigations. If we have our alerts mapped to MITRE, we can also bring out MITRE updates. So again, if we have our T codes available to us via maybe our threat intel, we can then start to say why the analyst should care about this. So we can start to provide details based on MITRE's framework. And then finally, we have two other actions. So we've gone to two different threat intel sources, VirusTotal and Recorded Future here, both of whom have effectively tagged this hash as being malicious. They've both come back as effectively red. And we could click on the hash and get further details, and we'll look at that in a few moments too. But this is effectively enabled to see immediately for an analyst, looking at these three alerts, each in turn, and they can perform actions, but at a glance, they can see immediately that we're looking at a malicious activity. So they don't need to go and run additional queries. They don't need to go to external platforms. And really, we're kind of promoting our analysts into being decision makers, rather than having to be kind of focused around copy and pasting and taking URLs and hashes and uploading them manually into VirusTotal and whatever threat intel. We're actually enabling them to make a decision about what's the best course of events, what's the best course of action. So from here, we could look to simply close the case down if we decide that it's not malicious after all. Or we could say that we automatically, sorry, my Zoom went the wrong way. We could perhaps look to communicate externally. So we could say that we want to assign the case because we think it's a problem. And then we could use maybe Slack to communicate to the SOC team. So again, we can communicate with external or chat methods. So we could things like Slack and for Teams to bring organizations together. So everybody doesn't have to log into our platform, and we can keep everybody updated as to what's going on. Now, again, of course, these are the prescribed routes. So this is the approved route for a playbook to run. But we could be in a situation that our analyst immediately looks at this height of hours. We see the HR group, we see the time in the morning, and we think, well, actually, the easiest route for tonight right now would be to disable that account whilst we do further investigation. So whilst the playbooks may do that, we perhaps want to empower the analyst to make that decision as well. So we could come down here to manual actions, and then I've got a whole range of integrations on on my local host here. But basically, we've got many hundreds of integrations with effectively thousands of actions and API responses. But if we look at our AD, I could simply drop down to disable account and then simply perform that action to disable that account. Or I could be specific and choose the action or the account that I want to disable. So I could choose Adam's account here, or I could drop down to his full email address and say, right, I want to disable his account, execute the action, and then that user's account will be disabled. Or I could perhaps come down to one of my EDR tools and say, well, actually, I'd like to disable that account using my EDR. So again, I could come down to something like, let's look under here for SentinelOne. And then I could look to add the hash to a blacklist, or I could look to disable the endpoint, or I could look to initiate a scan on the endpoint. Providing the EDR tool supports it, all of these things can be done within a single tool. So again, I don't have to log on to any external services or applications. I could also, at this point, take the opportunity to ask for additional help. So I could say, look, like a virus has ran. And then I could look to get some additional help from colleagues. So if I needed to escalate this to my tier 2 colleagues, I could effectively then look to bring them in and add a commentary to the case. So again, I could now simply add that comment to the ticket. If I then go to my case wall, from here, I can then see that my comments and any kind of commentary that I put is stored on here. From this point as well, I'm effectively given a full audit trail. So anything that happens on the case, any kind of queries I run, any API interactions, so we can see here with things like recorded futures, all of this is held and stored on the case. So whilst on the front screen with those insights, we provide a high level data telling an analyst that something is malicious or suspicious, we can actually provide the detail behind it as well. So at this point here, I could look at something like the recorded futures response And I could actually come back and pull back the full JSON data as well. So if at some point in the future, I need to get back to this level of data and this depth, or maybe my tier 3 analysts really want to dig into what happened, all of this information is still held and saved. So whilst we only provide that high level data to the end, the kind of tier 1 analysts, we still kind of keep this depth of data here as well. I could also look to bring a task as well. So if I needed to bring a colleague in, I could look to assign a task. So I've got a lot of kind of abilities to collaborate and communicate with my colleagues. And I can also help kind of bring in additional assistance as and when I may need it. So this is kind of like my overview of our C2 traffic case. Combine that with our malware discovery and our malware kind of response as how we can kind of look to reduce time spent to resolve these issues. My final point just to look at on here as well is that any of our entities, as I hover over them, are effectively hyperlinked. So any of them here I can effectively click on, and I will then be shown our Entity Explorer for that entity. So here on this particular file name, which is ending in a very long number, we can also see that it's been referred to for different hashes. So we've actually seen it before in the platform. So this 8135 was part of my original case, but it's actually been also known in the system before with this different hash. I can also see obviously the user is linked to. So at this point now, I could actually click on this hash and dig deeper into it as well. So now I can start to say, okay, so that file name that we saw before was known by 2 separate hashes, and it's also now also been known by this file name. So again, I can keep drilling and digging into the platform. Any of the kind of queries that we run, so if we do things like with virus total or our recorded futures, all of that data is also held as metadata on the entity as well. So again, I can scroll back here and see all of the responses that came back from our threat intelligence sources. I can also provide commentary. So if I want to put additional notes regarding this hash, I can store them against the entity, and then they're again available for all of my colleagues to see. So all of these things kind of make it very simple and easy to manage and triage my cases. As I go through, I can change the stage of the case as well. So if I need to track things like mean time to detect and mean time to respond, or any other kind of mean times that you wish to monitor and track, you can do that simply within the platform. It's entirely customizable. Within the tooling, we can start to see things around our dashboarding as well. So dashboards, again, it's pretty standard fare. Any kind of SOAR and seams in many ways provide these kind of GUI widgets, and they're all customizable. So here I can start to see where my alerts are distributed. I can start to see the entities that generate that we see most often. And I can also see different products. So if I started to see a sudden uptick in alerts from my firewalls, or maybe my particular seam starts generating a crazy amount of alerts, it gives me a heads up that maybe there's some additional tuning, or maybe there's a problem on that particular product I need to investigate. All of these widgets themselves are customizable. So I can simply add new ones up here, or I could customize one in turn. And again, these all change in real time. So any alterations I make here will be dynamically changed here as well. So if we want to change them by a different value, so now I can adjust them by identifier, make the change, I can see what it's going to look like, create the save, and we immediately update. I can choose who can view these, so I can have controls about visibility, and I can also create multiple dashboards as well. So if I wanted to see something around my playbooks, perhaps I wanted to see if I've got any errors running currently, how long they take to run, how often they're running, which ones are closing cases down. Again, all these kind of performance metrics are available to me within the platform itself. Now, finally, the last thing just to touch on, often kind of one of the most commonly asked questions really is, we're new to automation, where do we begin? So whilst we can see all of these fantastic playbooks and these automation workflows, how do we begin this journey? So to help on that, Simplify have our own marketplace, and the marketplace gives you a really good place to start. So from within here, we have use cases that are pre-built by ourselves, that are built out via our community, or that are provided by our partners. And these particular use cases, and if I just open up our malware one here via Checkpoint, they give you a heads up on what the use case is going to do. We provide you with a sample of playbooks. So again, we can start to see a framework for what a playbook should look like for malware. And we can also provide a heads up on all the various integrations and technology. So this use case would then install the relevant components in order to run it. And again, we have a whole range of different use cases that we have enabled. So if we were looking at things to do with executables from CrowdStrike, again, similar scenario, and then we could look down at all the various playbooks, and we've then got a range of playbooks that would be delivered as part of this use case. And again, it would provide you with an indication of the different integrations needed in order to achieve these playbook actions. Alternatively, we can also see what all the integrations are up here as well. So the integrations give us access to our marketplace. We update this on at least a weekly basis that would either have brand new integrations or modifications to existing. And it's super simple. We just simply type what we're looking for. So if we're interested in Microsoft ATP, we can simply search for it, download the relevant integration. We can read documentation online as well, so we can see all of the actions and things that we support. Again, if we want to bring that in from our EDR tools, or if we want to bring in our malware alerts, maybe they've come in from our SIEM. So if we have something from a Splunk platform, perhaps, again, we can ingest those alerts and we can provide the automations and the actions accordingly. So I think as an initial kind of cover for malware and how we can help for speeding up responses via playbooks, I think that's probably the end of my demonstration. Caroline, if we have any questions or thoughts.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rob. My first question is, does the Simplify platform have role-based access control?
Does it have role-based access? Absolutely. So you can create customized roles and then assign permissions to them. And so a user like myself, I can be a member of multiple groups and therefore have different role-based access.
Awesome, thank you. And can I use Simplify if I don't have a SIM?
Absolutely. So while SIMs are pretty common, obviously, for ingesting alerts, we often find that not all data is held on a SIM for cost or just deployment reasons. So whilst we can bring alerts in from a SIEM, we can also bring them in from any other source as well. So providing we have an API and we can reach out to them, we can bring alerts in from pretty much any tool that generates an alert.
Great. And my final question is the platform multi-tenant?
Absolutely. So in fact, that's something I could show very simply here, if I use the right screen, of course. So the platform itself is fully multi-tenanted. So as we went through, we perhaps saw these little icons as we went along, and effectively every component of the platform from the ground up was designed to be multi-tenant. So it's not been added later as an afterthought. It was designed from day one for full multi-tenancy.
Thank you. Okay, so I think that's all we have for questions for today. I'm just going to share quick slides. So before we go, I do want to quickly mention that here at Simplify, we do have a free community edition of our platform. So the community edition is completely a free version of our SOAR platform, and you really get to experience the full power of managing security operations from a single platform in your own environment. So you can really hit the ground running from zero to hero with ready to use deploy cases and building playbooks, integrating your tools and responding security alerts with speed and precision. So in addition to trying out SOAR for the first time, you also get access to our Slack community. So you can join a group of security operation experts from around the world. And to download, you can visit simplify.co/community, and you can gain access to the community now. So again, I want to thank you all so much for joining us today. And if you have any additional questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. Thank you.